Seika Lamprogue, failing a magic test that revealed he possessed none of the required attributes, was met with indifference from his father and ridicule from his elder brother. Unconcerned, however, he remained indifferent. In his previous life, he was the strongest on Myoji, riding invincible demons. When a town was attacked, he effortlessly dispatched hordes of demons with a mere handful of paper. However, after helping the court eradicate a region of demons, the court, through his most beloved younger brother, framed him and sent him to his death. In his final moments, he realized that his excessive pursuit of power had blinded him to the court's conspiracy. He understood that his carelessness in this life was a mistake and resolved to succeed in the next. Using his strongest on Myoji technique, he reincarnated into another world to pursue happiness. Upon arriving in this new world, he learned that everyone there used magic, but he was found to possess none. This meant his status within his family would plummet. Although he lacked magic, Seika discovered he possessed abundant and potent incantation within him, capable of using yin-yang magic. So, when no one was around, he gathered some leaves to use as talismans, wanting to test if he could still use yin-yang magic. After confirming he could still use it, he gathered some raw materials and made them into paper in the courtyard. Back home, he cut them into talismans for using yin-yang magic. Just as he finished making the talismans, his doorbell rang. Opening it, he found a blonde-haired girl, Aoife, who had found his coat hidden by his second brother in a flower pot. Seika was about to thank her when his second brother, Gray, arrived. Gray's purpose wasn't to reprimand Aoife, but rather to boast about his upcoming trip to Magic Academy and mock Seika for not having magic and being able to stay home and play all day without attending classes. Just as Gray was about to continue speaking, Seika's father arrived with his older brother. He first stopped Gray, then said they would test their magic that day. He then left with Gray and his brother, showing no concern for Seika. At this point, Seika called out to his father, saying he wanted to try it too. At the training ground, the older brother was tested first. After chanting, he released a blade, and as the eldest brother, his strength was naturally considerable, easily creating a hole in the stone. Next, it was Gray's turn. He used fire magic, but the damage was much lower than his brother's. He released a fireball, but failed to damage the stone. After casting his spell, Gray approached the protagonist, offering his magic wand with a hint of mockery, insisting that the protagonist try it. Although Seika didn't want to gain anything from this test, he knew that the weak would only be exploited, so he decided to demonstrate his strength. This stunned all three people present. They hadn't expected that Sakia to be able to cast spells without any magical power, and the fireballs were even blue. The more knowledgeable father quickly realized what was happening, saying that there had been instances of people without magical power using magic before, and that the color of the magic varied depending on its nature. Seika didn't seem to care, since he wasn't using magic. He then made a request to his father, saying he wanted to learn magic, but this idea was immediately rejected. Since there was no precedent for someone without magic becoming a master magician, he would only hire a tutor and wouldn't send the protagonist to a magic academy. So, in the following years, Seika learned the world's script from his teacher, and in his spare time, he would use yin-yang magic to secretly watch his brothers practice. Finally, when the protagonist was 11 years old, he completed the replication of summoning a monster. In his previous life, the protagonist had subdued several monsters that could serve as fighting forces and sealed them in a phase. A phase is essentially equivalent to a consciousness release, meaning that even if the protagonist were reincarnated here, he could summon them again. However, he didn't know what would happen after so much time had passed, so he decided to summon a more obedient one first. Seika was surprised to find that the demon fox spirit Yuki summoned had changed. In his past life, she was a beautiful young woman, but now she was a girl about his age. It seemed to be influenced by his current magical power and the world around him. Seika's first summoning of the fox spirit was mainly to test whether he could summon it at all. Now that he could, he had the fox spirit change form so that others wouldn't easily discover it. The next day, the blonde maid Aoife found the protagonist and said she wanted to take him somewhere. Upon arrival, Seika realized that the blonde maid had found an injured ruby beast cub and wanted the protagonist to see if he could heal it. As the strongest on Myoji, Seika naturally had no problem with this. He told the blonde maid that his spellcasting couldn't be seen and asked her to turn away. After confirming that his on Myoji technique wouldn't be detected, Seika took a hair from the ruby beast, placed it on a paper whisk, and chanted an incantation. In an instant, the ruby beast's injuries were completely healed. After doing this, Seika asked the blonde maid again, "Can you see things that people can't?" He often saw blonde maid's gaze following the souls of animals. Hearing this, Aoife couldn't hide it anymore and told the protagonist that she could indeed see spirits, and that they were the ones who found the protagonist's coat. The protagonist then fell into thought. In his past life, there was a fox demon who could control people's souls. He thought that an onmyoji should be able to do the same, but after many attempts, he failed. He planned to find someone with this talent later, but unexpectedly, he encountered Aoife in his reincarnation. So, for the next year, Seika taught the blonde maid how to command spirits. However, when Seika was 12 years old, on his birthday, the maid rushed in saying that a monster had appeared nearby. The protagonist's father managed to repel it with fire magic, but the monster was fleeing towards their manor. Just as the maid finished speaking, the protagonist sensed the monster approaching. His older brother Luft quickly told everyone to hide and closed all the doors and windows, as they were no match for the monster. However, Seika ignored his advice and ran towards the monster. Just then, his father returned home and witnessed the protagonist defeating the monster. That evening, to celebrate the protagonist's victory over the monster, the father then planned to reward the protagonist handsomely. Seika then made his request. Although he had no magical power since childhood, he had always practiced magic in his own way, so he hoped to attend a magic academy. His second brother was shocked, but considering the years the protagonist had spent practicing magic alone, the father agreed. Although the second brother strongly resisted, the father ignored him, reminding the protagonist that even as a nobleman, he was not exempt from enrollment. He had to earn it through his own efforts. After thanking his father, Seika immediately made another request, to be allowed Aoife to attend the academy with him. Upon Upon hearing this, Aoife was instantly flustered. However, his father urged him to give up, arguing that Aoife lacked magical talent. The protagonist, however, insisted that these weren't problems. He pulled Aoife aside and shoved his wand into Aoife's hand, saying, "If you want to come with me, command the spirits to unleash flames." Looking at the wand, Aoife naturally wanted to go with the protagonist, so she made up her mind. Several fireballs appeared out of thin air. Seika then asked father what he thought, and his father agreed. However, his second brother disagreed, believing that he should be the one going to the magic academy. Yes, sending someone without magic power to school with their mother-in-law is completely pointless, but the father had no intention of reconsidering. He chose to send the second brother to the army. Upon hearing that he was going to the battlefield, the second brother panicked instantly. The father thought he was not only physically strong, but also skilled in swordsmanship, making him a good candidate for the army. However, the second brother said that he was different from Seika. He had magic power. In that case, the father asked him to talk about what he had been doing these past few years and whether he had made any effort to improve his strength. He only saw the second brother spending his days idly. Seeing that his father's approach was not working, the second brother challenged Seika, with the wager being to attend the academy. The father challenged the protagonist to a contest, stating that if he lost, he would be kicked out of the house. The father then asked for the protagonist's opinion, and he accepted. The competition was set for the next afternoon, with the rules being that no real swords or magic stronger than the ultimate level could be used. After returning to his room, the protagonist hurriedly crafted talismans. At this moment, Yuki emerged from his hair, asking if he wanted to kill his second brother. The protagonist refused, deeming that impossible. Just then, a knock on the door interrupted their conversation. It was his eldest brother. However, given the late hour, the protagonist inquired what he wanted. Then, the older brother finally spoke his belated words, wishing Seika a happy birthday. He then handed him his gift, which the protagonist opened to find a glass fountain pen. The older brother explained that he appreciated the protagonist's love of learning and had given him the pen. He then apologized for previously keeping him at arm's length, but said he was happy to see how talented the protagonist was and was very proud. He asked the protagonist to go easy on him in tomorrow's competition, promising he would learn from his mistake. The protagonist didn't refuse. After the older brother left, the protagonist took out the pen to admire it. Yuki complained that his eldest brother was actually quite smart, but just then, the male protagonist noticed something. He told Yuki to disappear first. As soon as he finished speaking, a strong gust of wind came from outside the window. Seika went to the window and saw it was his second brother. His second brother told him to come down and fight immediately. The male protagonist naturally knew he couldn't wait until tomorrow, but his second brother didn't give him a chance to speak. He asked the male protagonist when he had ever had any designs on the academy. The male protagonist said he had wanted to study there before. His second brother told him not to get carried away, that he was just lucky, that he had only encountered and defeated a magical beast by chance. He said the rules set by their father didn't count, and that the fight would begin now, until one side surrendered or lost the ability to fight. The loser. The protagonist said he would tell his father he was withdrawing from the competition the next day. Seeing the opponent's posture, the protagonist said using ultimate magic was dangerous. But so what? The opponent didn't care at all. Immediately afterward, a magic circle appeared under the Seika's feet. Unexpectedly, it was White Mask's first skill. Just when the second brother thought victory was in his grasp, the protagonist appeared unharmed in the same spot. Gray was unlucky and released another gale gun at the protagonist, but unexpectedly, Seika directly released a barrier and easily blocked the attack. At this point, Seika didn't want to play anymore, so he took out a talisman from his pocket, slowly placed it in front of his chest, and let Gray attack his barrier. After defeating Gray, the protagonist recalls 6 months ago when he summoned a Cyclops from an alleyway and had him roam the forest with a Godslayer, eventually finding the lava monster's lair and driving it out. Spring arrived quickly, and Seika boarded a carriage to go to the Magic Academy. On the way, he gave a necklace to the blonde maid. It was made by a magician, and spirits would come to her. Meanwhile, at home, the Seika's father sat at his desk, reminiscing about 12 years ago. It was a rainy day when his younger brother, who had been missing in demon territory for a long time, suddenly reappeared, dumped the protagonist on him, and ran away, but he couldn't understand why. The father was surprised to learn that the male protagonist could use magic at the age of 1, leading him to suspect a connection to demons. However, later tests revealed that the protagonist had no magical power. Furthermore, he observed that the flames the protagonist released in the training ground didn't resemble fireballs, but rather the flames of some burning substance. Considering the recent commotion involving the lava monster, things seemed more complex than they appeared. Finally, when the protagonist killed the lava monster, it seemed as if it had been poisoned. Taking all these factors into account, the father concluded that the protagonist was more complex than he initially thought. Therefore, he had to sacrifice Gray, sending the protagonist to a magic academy. Because if the protagonist were to join the Imperial Army, the environment there might turn him into a demon king, while going to the Magic Academy might make him a hero. Meanwhile, the two protagonists arrived at the Magic Academy's registration office. The staff said they needed to test their magic attributes first. Knowing he had no magic, the protagonist let the Yofa go first. After the magic ball flashed for a while, it showed that Aoife's attributes were wind and fire. When it was the protagonist's turn, he, as usual, had no magic. However, even without magic, he could still participate in the entrance exam. The students behind him gossiped, all thinking it was just a noble's child trying to get in through connections. Then, a red-haired girl Amu stepped out from the crowd and headed straight for the magic test. Unexpectedly, it was white, possessing all 4 attributes. After the test, Amu quickly left. Seika called her back, thanking her for helping to deflect the other students' gossip. Amu replied that she hadn't actually helped, but simply felt the others were noisy and weren't registering, so she rushed in to take the test. Then, the protagonist noticed that the red-haired girl's appearance was remarkably similar to the disciple who had killed him in his past life. The only difference was his hair color. This protagonist was such a show-off. Other students' entrance exam spells had extraordinary incantations, and even when released, they were mostly harmless. But this protagonist not only cast spells without incantations, but he didn't even bother to name his spells. However, the Seika knew to restrain himself, only simulating 3 types of magic using yin-yang techniques. It wasn't that he didn't want to show off, but mainly because the remaining elements, light, darkness, and wind, were outside the yin-yang 5 elements, and he couldn't learn them. His female classmate, who entered the school with him, manipulated spirits, so she could also cast spells without chanting, and her strength was no less than his. Although the male protagonist performed exceptionally well in the exam, he only achieved 3rd place. The top 2 spots went to the Ifa, who scored higher because she called out the spell's name, and the 1st place went to the Amyu, who possessed all attributes in the previous test. She easily destroyed all the markers. Even the teacher in charge of proctoring couldn't help but speculate that she might be the legendary hero. That night, the 2 received their admission notices and school uniforms. From that day forward, they would need to attend school. As the 2 were preparing to attend the entrance ceremony, the male protagonist discovered numerous dark spirits in the nearby bushes, which surprised him. He went closer to investigate, and to his surprise, a huge magic circle appeared behind a jar of wood. It seemed the dark spirits had gathered there. Although he wanted to study the circle, he wasn't sure if it belonged to the Magic Academy, so he told the maid to go to the ceremony first and leave it at that. However, before leaving, he left behind a few monitoring feathers just in case. Upon arriving at the auditorium, the red-haired girl, as a representative of the new students, gave a speech. Seika, however, sensed an unknown aura approaching rapidly towards the entrance. Sure enough, with a loud crash, the door shattered, and the students in the auditorium scattered in panic. As the smoke cleared, 2 demons appeared before them. Seika's eyes darted around as if searching for something, but he couldn't quite make out their target. Meanwhile, some students stepped forward and attacking the demons with magic. However, unlike the protagonist, they didn't have any special abilities. Their magic didn't even scratch the demons. Seika, unable to bear watching any longer, took out his fingerprint to intervene, but unexpectedly, someone stepped forward first. It was the strongest freshwoman, the red-haired student. She not only easily dodged the demons' attacks, but also launched her own magic. Under such intense attacks, the demons could only retreat. However, Seika noticed something amiss. The demons were moving slowly. They didn't seem like the main force at all. Perhaps these 2 demons were just using a diversionary tactic. Realizing something was wrong, the protagonist immediately checked the surveillance footage. Sure enough, dozens of demons were standing near the magic circle. After figuring out what had happened, the protagonist approached the maid Ifa and told her that she was very safe here with the Amyu's protection. He was told to use magic to escape if anything went wrong. After saying this, the protagonist left alone, leaving only a fingerprint next to the maid. Reaching the magic circle, the protagonist first provoked the dozens of demons with words, wanting them to make a move and see what techniques they had. After all, he had never seen this species in either of his lives, so it was quite a novelty. Soon, the dozens of demons couldn't withstand the provocation and activated the magic circle, summoning 3 lesser demons to charge at the protagonist. However, Seika simply took out 2 talismans and easily dealt with 2 of the lesser demons. Finally, Seika opened the Gate of Phases, locking himself inside for later study. Seeing the protagonist's skill, the dozens of demons opposite him prepared to attack. They released multiple magic circles around themselves, summoning great swords to strike. The protagonist, unperturbed, first released a talisman to test the waters, but it was easily blocked by the demons. They could see through the protagonist's incredible talisman. Seika then unleashed several yin-yang techniques, all easily neutralized by the demons. Finally, the demons summoned another great sword to stab the protagonist. The speed was unusually slow, and the protagonist easily dodged it. Just as he was wondering about this, the great sword flew back past his head, and because he couldn't dodge in time, he was slashed on the face. The demon pressed its advantage, releasing another burst of flame. Seika had to jump into the air to avoid the attack, but unexpectedly, he was hit by the demon's brain. Seika was surprised that this demon was so skilled at using teleportation arrays. He was willing to accept losing an arm, but before that, he wanted to ask the demon a question. What were they looking for at the academy? The demon saw the protagonist. He knew he wouldn't live much longer, so he said, according to a prophecy from 12 years ago, the demon king is about to awaken, and a red-haired hero will appear in this academy. After speaking, the demon wielded his greatsword and attacked the protagonist, killing him. The demon was basking in the joy of victory when he suddenly heard the protagonist's voice behind him. He was stunned. How could the person he had personally beheaded have come back to life? But he didn't care about that, and wielded his greatsword to stab the protagonist again. Unexpectedly, the protagonist tilted his head. His injuries instantly healed, and even the demon's greatsword was disintegrated. The demon below was furious. Since you can resurrect, then I'll hack you to death. The demon summoned countless greatswords, thrusting them at the protagonist. This time, however, the protagonist wanted to play around a bit longer, so he jumped to dodge the demon's swords. Unexpectedly, an attack came from behind. The demon then used a paper whisk to unleash a waterfall spell. Seeing the vortex below, the protagonist had already guessed the demon would use teleportation magic to escape, so he was prepared. After dodging the attack, he summoned a thunder beast with the paper whisk. Because the demon was now completely wet, a lightning attack would definitely deal double the damage. The thunder beast summoned a bolt of lightning from the sky, precisely striking the demon's position. Seika initially thought the demon was doomed, but to his surprise, when the smoke cleared, the demon was nowhere to be found. The demon then appeared behind the protagonist, stabbing him in the waist with its claw. The demon hadn't realized that it was all a series of paper dolls created by the protagonist. None of the ones it had killed were real. Still unwilling to give up, the demon stood up and said, "You've used so many paper dolls. I don't believe you have anymore." The protagonist simply smiled and said, "What do you think I've been doing all my life?" He then unleashed a deluge of paper dolls. The demon was stunned. He had expected the protagonist to have some more, but he hadn't expected so many. At this point, the protagonist decided he didn't want to continue playing this game because he had already figured out the specifics of the demon. After defeating it, Seika prepared to return the dragon to its phase, but unexpectedly, Unexpectedly, the dragon tried to escape. This enraged the protagonist, who released all his paper whisks to chase it. After circling in the air several times, they finally drove it into the phase gate. After defeating the demon, the protagonist returned to the ceremony. Unexpectedly, Amyu had also killed several lesser demons. Seeing this, Seika began to ponder. Now that a hero like Amyu was the strongest, she only needed to be the mastermind behind the scenes. That way, even if she were framed again, it wouldn't be his turn. Therefore, he needed to find a way to become an ally of Amyu. The male protagonist encountered Amyu on the street and wanted to greet him by mentioning their previous encounter with the demon. However, Amyu completely ignored him, leaving the protagonist embarrassed and picking at his toes for 2.5 hours. If Aoife hadn't called out to him, Seika would have finished picking at his toes much sooner. After the embarrassment subsided, the protagonist and his maid prepared to go to class, but suddenly a jar fell from the sky. Luckily, Seika reacted quickly and used the flying thunder god technique to escape with the maid. Once safe, the protagonist went to check the situation and discovered that the liquid inside the paper duster was corroded. Just as the male protagonist was wondering what it was, the blue-haired teacher upstairs poked his head out and asked if the two were all right. It turned out that the jar belonged to him. The blue-haired teacher had originally intended to use dark magic to carry it upstairs, but he was only proficient in light magic, which led to his mistake and the jar falling. The liquid inside was made from demon blood. Upon hearing this, the male protagonist thought, no wonder it smells so bad. Fortunately, no one was hurt this time. After clarifying the situation, the male protagonist took Aoife to class. As soon as they arrived in the classroom, the teacher announced an important piece of news. Next week was the school's anniversary celebration, and the first and second students in the class would be selected to help with the decorations. The task involved taking the class roster to the temple in the forest for worship. Upon hearing this, Seika couldn't help but recall the demon who had set up a magic circle in the forest to ambush the maid Aoife. This time, Aoife was second in his class, and if she went, she might encounter danger. Thinking of this, Seika stood up and asked the teacher what would happen if the second-place student didn't go. The teacher replied that it was simple. If the second-place student didn't go, the third would, and the third-place student happened to be the protagonist. Aoife was initially stunned, but after spending so much time together, she trusted the protagonist's authority and believed the protagonist must have his reasons, so she agreed. Seika and Amyu were walking alone in the forest. Seika had only intended to chat, but unexpectedly, Amyu completely transformed when no one was around. Hey, that father's eldest disciple isn't enough, I'll get physical. Suddenly, 3 lizard men appeared in front of them. Amyu charged forward with her sword, leaping up and plunging her sword into one of the lizard men's heads. She landed and easily dispatched all 3 lizard men with a fire spell. However, before Amyu could even gloat for 3 seconds, a giant appeared behind her, but she was still in his bravado and had no time to dodge. Luckily, Seika reacted quickly and used his brush to create a wooden stake. Amyu, who easily smashed the giant to death against the ceiling, was amazed, saying she had never seen such magic before. The protagonist, however, had to take advantage of Amyu's ignorance as a commoner, explaining that only nobles like himself could learn it. The two continued searching for the exit, while the protagonist released paper talismans as they went. He had previously left some divine illusions sealed within the academy. Now, by using these talismans to react with the magic, they could find the exit. Suddenly, a sound came from the depths of the maze. As the sound drew closer, a large wave of monsters rushed towards them. Amyu charged forward again with her sword, easily dispatching the first few monsters. However, just as she was attacking a giant, she cut off one of its arms, but unexpectedly, she suddenly had a headache. She missed her chance to attack and was punched by a giant, flying against the wall and losing her fighting ability. Then, a group of giants surrounded her. Seeing that Amyu was about to be overpowered by the Minotaur, the protagonist, no longer daring to hold back, quickly released a large number of wooden stakes to clear away the monsters on Amyu's side. He then ran to Amyu and protected her. Seeing that the threat in front of her had been eliminated, Amyu relaxed and fell into a deep sleep. The protagonist, who was in front, also secretly glanced at her, and seeing that Amyu was unconscious, no longer hesitated. So, now it's time for some showing off. When Amyu woke up again, the monsters had been cleared away by the protagonist, and her injuries had been transferred to a substitute talisman, but she still suffered from recurring headaches, so Seika asked her if this was a recurring problem. Amyu said she had never had headaches before, only starting after entering the academy. Hearing this, the protagonist had a big guess, so he took out the talisman and released a crystal, and Amyu's headache immediately disappeared. It seems the protagonist's guess was correct. This was a sign of being cursed. Amyu, upon hearing this, said, "That doesn't make sense. Doesn't a cursed person have a curse mark on their body? I haven't seen any when I shower." The protagonist, standing nearby, suggested, "Perhaps it's in a part of your body that you can't see." Amyu thought this made sense since her back was invisible, so she offered to let the male protagonist take a look, and then started taking off her clothes. Seika carefully examined Amyu's back, but found no trace of the curse mark. Was it too close to her skin tone or too small? It seemed he needed to observe more closely. Seeing his plan exposed, Seika didn't want to observe any further, saying that it wasn't necessary to find the curse mark. The barrier being effective meant she was definitely cursed. But Amyu retorted that this wasn't right. The Shakya curse required contact, and she hadn't touched anyone since entering school. The male protagonist laughed, thinking, "You're quite ignorant. Our noble Shakya curse doesn't require contact. Woman's body, not out of any particular fetish, but to use yin-yang magic to transfer the curse onto a talisman." After finishing everything, Seika chatted with Amyu again, but unexpectedly, she gradually became perverse, asking the male protagonist if he really hadn't done anything to Aoife, such as kissing or kneading him. The male protagonist couldn't help but sweat when he heard these questions. Was this Amyu really the same person from the academy? However, Seika still explained that he and maid Aoife really hadn't done anything, saying that he had always considered Aoife as family. Because he was the son of a concubine when he was young, he was very unwelcome at home, and only Ifa treated him normally, so he treated the slave as family. After hearing the male protagonist's experience, Amyu couldn't help but feel sad, so he started to talk about his own experience. He was born into an ordinary family. His mother was a guild leader and his father was an adventurer. He himself was different from others from a young age. While other children were playing with toys, he preferred fighting. By becoming the strongest and having no opponents, would he lose the desire to fight and become a truly ordinary person? After saying all this, Amyu's affection for the Seika increased considerably. In the following time, the two continued their journey through the maze, constantly battling monsters, which greatly satisfied Amyu's fighting spirit. Finally, they arrived at the Demon King's gate. After peeking through the crack in the door, Amyu said that the two of them might not be able to defeat the Demon King, but Seika assured her not to worry, as he had a cheat code like himself, and guaranteed to help her easily defeat the Demon King. Hearing this, Amyu felt relieved and went in with Seika to fight the boss. Although Seika played a support role, each attack dealt significant damage to the Demon King and effectively restricted his movement, allowing Amyu to attack from the best positions. Amyu finished the battle. It must be said that the male protagonist's move was truly masterful, making the red-haired girl extremely happy. Seika could have easily used the substitute talisman and the divine illusion to escape, but to increase Amyu's favor, he accompanied her through countless monster battles and defeating the Demon King to find the exit. Amyu, but unexpectedly also stole of this ring, had no effect, but it contained powerful energy, perfect for the maid Ifa to attract spirits. After exiting, the male protagonist first reported entering the maze to the academy, but concealed his actions. He then went to the blue-haired teacher's office, as he was the one who released the curse. Seika had already noticed something amiss with him. The pollen stains on the blue-haired man's collar were only found near the magic circle earlier. After being tested, the blue-haired teacher dropped the pretense, admitting he was a spy planted in the human camp by the demon. This curse was also his innovation. Anyone touched by demon blood would be cursed. Amyu had been covered in blood when he killed 3 demons, which is why she was cursed. Hearing this, Seika recalled the previous incident where the blue-haired teacher accidentally dropped something, indicating that this time his actions were quite significant. Understanding the blue-haired guy's motive, Seika didn't want to waste any more time. He summoned the previously sealed demon, injured it, and let its blood soak him. Transfer the curse onto the blue-haired guy. Watching the blue-haired guy die, Seika felt incredibly satisfied, as curse magic was a specialty of yin-yang magic. Using this on the blue-haired guy, an otherworldly being, was like showing off one's skills in front of an expert. After resolving everything, Seika found the maid Ifa and gave her the ring. Amyu also approached, and the protagonist, as usual, helped her pack the bag, only to be met with another awkward situation. Seika and Yida received an invitation from the Dean of the Magic Academy to participate in a comprehensive martial arts competition held in the capital. Their partner was a new female student named Mabel. Spot? Thinking about this, Seika felt something was amiss and decided to participate in the competition himself to see how things went. Ifa was also indignant. In the years since the underground labyrinth, she had come to acknowledge the male protagonist's strength and character, complaining that Mabel was definitely a VIP, just trying to use this competition to embellish her resume, and that she would concede defeat not long after the competition started. After all, it would be incredibly painful for a rich girl raised without a care in the world to get injured during a competition. Unexpectedly, Mabel emerged from behind them. Hearing this, Amyu couldn't stand it anymore. She immediately stopped 2 classmates who were practicing nearby and borrowed their practice swords. She was going to have a match with Mabel today to see who was the weaker one. Amyu never imagined she would be defeated by a freshman. Although Mabel used massage techniques during the match, she ultimately won decisively. After winning, Mabel first mocked Amyu, then told the protagonist that if his attitude remained so frivolous, he should withdraw from the competition as soon as possible before leaving without looking back. However, Seika didn't care at all. After all, his strength was already at the pinnacle in this world. Could anyone possibly defeat him in a competition? Even after being helped up by the protagonist and his friend, Amyu wasn't careless. She decided that she would also go to hell with the protagonist this time. Even if he didn't participate in the competition, she would still observe Mabel's fighting style. A few days passed quickly, and Seika and his companions boarded a carriage bound for the capital. On the carriage, Seika felt extremely unwell, as he had suffered from motion sickness since his previous life. Seeing this, Mabel couldn't help but mock him, saying he was a disgrace and that everyone present was just an innocent child, always laughing and joking, completely oblivious to the need for seriousness. Seika could only laugh awkwardly. With so many people around, he couldn't very well summon a dragon as a mount. Otherwise, he wouldn't even want to ride in the carriage. After some time, Seika and his group finally arrived in the capital. Upon arrival, Mabel left without a word, while the protagonist, still recovering from his motion sickness, needed to go to the arena to check the match schedule first. This time, Seika was the first contestant to appear. If the competition went smoothly, he and Mabel would meet in the semifinals. Although the schedule was arranged, the male protagonist still randomly didn't expect to encounter a rival from the same school before the finals. After watching, the male protagonist told Amyu and his companion to go sightseeing in the capital. He went back to the hotel to rest first. Before leaving, Seika still had doubts about Mabel replacing the Amyu, so he placed several surveillance cameras in the arena. The next day, the competition began. The use of magic. Half of the participants in this competition were mages, and a new rule regarding protective clothing damage had been added. The protective clothing could absorb attacks for the wearer, and would be damaged if it exceeded its limit, thus maximizing the survival of the competitors. The first match was the protagonists, against a swordsman with a military force, a lineup that excited the audience. Arena saying that his motion sickness hadn't subsided, and he wanted to go back to rest as soon as possible. Hearing this, the opponent assumed the protagonist was weak and was just making excuses for the upcoming fight. Seika simply smiled and said he just wanted to finish the fight quickly and go back to sleep, teleported behind him. Wanting to rest, the protagonist didn't waste any time and easily quickly finished him off with a simple yin-yang technique. The second match was between a white-haired man and a blue-haired man. The white-haired man calmly walked onto the stage, glanced at the blue-haired man, and the blue-haired man was instantly paralyzed. Fatality in the competition. Seika, watching from the stands, sensed something was amiss. The white-haired man's magic resembled that of a sorcerer, channeling spells into his eyes. The protagonist, at a speed invisible to the naked eye, summoned a divine general, the 10-element twisting kill. After completing his ritual, Seika approached his opponent, adopting a very friendly expression, and said, "If you don't surrender, you'll have to lend me your power." After winning the match, Seika went to the stands, where Aoife looked worried. She had seen injuries and deaths in the previous matches, and feared the protagonist might also die. Hearing this, Seika just smiled and told the maid Aoife that he wasn't targeting anyone, and that fighting these people was like playing with puppies. Seeing the protagonist's confidence, Aoife finally relaxed. At this moment, the referee announced the start of the second match of the day. Mabel, who had previously targeted Amu, versus the top-level Breath Mage. At the beginning of the battle, Mabel easily neutralized the Breath Mage's attacks with her excellent swordsmanship. Seeing that Mabel was no ordinary opponent, the Breath Mage began to chant a high-level spell. However, before he could finish the incantation, Mabel approached with a throwing knife. The Breath Mage had to stop chanting and first release a rock wall base, but for some reason, Mabel simply threw the lightly knife and the rock wall shattered as if it had been hit by a heavy blow. The audience present was just as bewildered as you watching on screen, but Seika saw through it all. Mabel had applied gravity magic to the throwing knife, making its weight several times that of the rock wall. That's why the rock wall shattered so easily upon contact. But what surprised Seika wasn't Mabel's gravity magic, but rather the ease with which she could create something so heavy. It seemed this person was more than she appeared. In the few seconds Seika was still pondering, Mabel had already delivered the decisive blow. He rushed to the Breath Mage, severed his staff, and then held the sword between the mage's eyes. Just like that, Mabel easily won the match. Mabel, as the hero, the protagonist was somewhat confused. Shouldn't the hero be the Amu? Seeing the protagonist's confusion, the Amu explained that because Mabel's name was the same as the second hero in history, and Mabel's weapon was also the same as that hero's, everyone assumed he was the hero. Guy tied a letter to a carrier pigeon in a dark street, preparing to release it to deliver a message. However, the pigeon was caught by the protagonist's Godslayer as soon as it took flight. Seeing that Seika had seen through his identity, the green-haired guy pretended to be confused and said he had to go to work. Then, he walked directly behind the protagonist, pulled out a knife, and prepared to kill him. It turned out that a long time ago, Seika had overheard the green-haired guy's conversation with the information broker through an owl surveillance system, which was why he was staking out this place that night. After finally subduing the green-haired guy, Seika asked him about his plans and the contents of the letter. However, the green-haired guy was stubborn and refused to utter a word despite the threats. Left with no other option, Seika summoned the Godslayer, Call, who could read minds. After Call read the green-haired guy's thoughts, Seika finally understood. Because he had previously dealt with the demon and the blue cat teacher, all of the demon spies within the academy had been cut off. Their current information was still based on the fact that the hero was Red Rice Traveler, and the recently appeared Mabel perfectly matched all the criteria, even sharing the same name as the second hero in history. So, the green-haired guy planned to relay the news that Mabel was the hero back. After that, the green-haired guy would be useless, so Seika rewarded Call with him as a snack. On the way back, Seika went over his thoughts again. The academy had created the Mabel persona to confuse the demons, making everyone believe she was the true hero, thus better protecting Amu. However, the protagonist still couldn't figure out why the academy had sent Mabel to compete this time, based on the current clues. The competition started as scheduled the next day. After winning the match, Mabel encountered the protagonist as she was leaving the arena. She threatened him, saying this was no joke and he should forfeit immediately. But Seika, being inherently anti-corruption, refused to give up and insisted on making it to the finals to fight her again. Later, Seika encountered a young knight with 4 attributes. This guy was very pretentious. As soon as he saw the protagonist, he said with disdain that he hoped to meet him in the finals and that the protagonist should not lose before then. However, in the second match, after the knight said these words, he encountered the blood-eyed white-haired man. At the start of the match, the knight used light attribute magic to try to block the white-haired man's blood-eyed immobilization, used other magic to try to stop him, but the white-haired man's strength exceeded the knight's expectations. Under these spells, the white-haired man didn't even lose a thread on his clothes. The knight panicked and charged at the white-haired man. Just as the white-haired man was about to finish him off, the referee blew his whistle. It seemed this knight had some connections with the organizers. Otherwise, he would have been eliminated today, would deliberately lose to Mabel in the semifinals the next day. Seika gave a vague answer, saying he wanted to sleep. Just as he closed his eyes, he suddenly noticed something strange under the covers. Lifting them, he saw Yuki had transformed into human form and was trying to turn the covers over. Seika, intending to take him outside for a duel. Once outside, the two exchanged tentative blows, neither gaining the upper hand. Suddenly, Mabel launched another attack, intending to finish off Seika with a single strike, only to discover upon impact that it was merely a decoy. At this moment, Seika was already behind him. Unsure of the protagonist's strength, Mabel hesitated to strike first. Suddenly, a drunkard emerged from behind the protagonist's attention and escaping from his sight. However, after Mabel's attack and escape, Seika pursued her, his purpose being simply to chat and understand Mabel's inner turmoil. This surprised Mabel, as he had just intended to kill the protagonist. Why was the protagonist now talking to him? Hearing Mabel's confusion, Seika simply smiled and said, "Actually, I know you didn't really want to kill me." And then there's the homeless man who wandered in. After Seika exposed her true intentions, Mabel stopped pretending and directly admitted that she attacked first because she was afraid the protagonist would kill the homeless man. Her purpose in attacking the protagonist was to injure him so he couldn't participate in the competition because he had some unspeakable secrets. Hearing Mabel's Mabel say this, the protagonist grew annoyed, saying, "I know you're the red-haired hero's stand-in. Your mission in this tournament is to win the championship and make the demons believe you're the hero." Mabel hadn't expected the protagonist to have so much information, but she pointed out one thing the protagonist was wrong about. His mission wasn't to win the championship, but to die at the hands of the white-haired swordsman with bloodshot eyes. Kyle, making the demons believe the hero died that way. Hearing this, Seika initially thought Kyle was also from the academy, but Mabel continued, saying that both she and Kyle were mercenaries trained by the Merchant Guild, magic imprinted on their brains, making them emotionless killing machines. When Mabel was very young, she, along with Kyle, her brother, and 2 others, were taken to the Merchant Guild for training. Assessment, as he had already killed 2 of his companions, one of whom was Mabel's brother. Therefore, Mabel didn't intend to obey the arrangements this time. She was determined to win her match against the protagonist, whose eyes were the same color as his own. Mabel hadn't expected the Seika to have such keen insight and reluctantly revealed her brother's instructions. Before undergoing surgery, Mabel's brother had said that if he became a different person after receiving the mark, Mabel must personally free him, win this semi-final. After all, Kyle was so strong, even Mabel might not survive, but if he went, it would be different, because in this world, Seika had never encountered anyone stronger than him. The next day, the semi-final began, and Mabel brought out her true weapon, an extremely heavy, giant axe. At the referee's signal, Mabel swiftly dodged behind the protagonist to launch a sneak attack. However, Seika, being the strongest on Myoji, was unfazed, even if he didn't dodge in time and was hit by Mabel's axe. He easily neutralized the attack with a substitute axe. Seeing how agile Mabel was with such a heavy axe, Seika guessed that she must have used magic gravity to alter the axe's weight. After withstanding several waves of Mabel's attacks, Seika directly attached a gravity axe to Mabel's axe, increasing its weight to 1,000 times its original. He then immediately followed up with a binding skill called Mercury Vine, which was much stronger than ordinary vines. Therefore, even someone like Mabel, who wields heavy weapons, found it difficult to break free once bound. Finally, when Mabel was unable to move him, Seika attached a gravity-reducing axe to the axe, picked it up, clamped it onto Mabel's axe, and easily won the match. The final match then began, and Seika finally faced off against the white-haired guy Kyle. At the referee's signal, Seika immediately summoned a mist Shikigami, making it impossible for those outside the arena to see what was happening inside. Only in this way could the male protagonist unleash his full power. Kyle showed no emotion at the sight of the scene, and simply turned towards the male protagonist step by step. Seeing this, Seika first released some small attacks to test the waters, but they did no damage to Kyle. Even the water cloud vines that had easily imprisoned Mabel earlier couldn't hold Kyle for 5 seconds. Under the wrath of the bull demon, Kyle couldn't even withstand a single blow. Fortunately, Seika had instructed the bull demon to show mercy, so Kyle's life wasn't in immediate danger. However, just as the protagonist was about to check on him, the mark on Whitehair's body activated. Seeing that the person he had spared was about to be killed by the cursed mark, the protagonist quickly released a barrier to isolate him. Senses grabbed the protagonist's hand and said he wanted to apologize to Mabel, but he couldn't do it in person, so he asked the protagonist to convey his apology. After saying this, he passed away. The protagonist, witnessing this, was furious. If he were to resurrect the white-haired man now, he would inevitably expose his strength, and this man had done him no favors. After weighing the pros and cons, Seika canceled the spell, letting Kyle die. He then hid the white-haired man's body in an alley and told the referee that he had accidentally destroyed the white-haired man. After the competition, the protagonist took Mabel to the inner and outer areas and buried Kyle's body. Upon hearing about the 4-leaf clover, Mabel could no longer hold back. This was something that happened before the white-haired man received the inscription. At that time, the white-haired man accidentally broke Mabel's 4-leaf clover hairpin, and the two had a small argument over it. Thinking of this, Mabel couldn't help but shed tears. Mabel, who should have died, survived. She couldn't find the meaning of life, so the protagonist told him to continue studying at the Magic Academy and that he would take care of the rest. Upon returning to the academy, Seika first went to the dean's office. In fact, the city deans of the Merchant Guild already knew that the purpose of sending the protagonist was to ensure Mabel's survival. After all, Mabel was a talent the academy had acquired. If she were killed by the white-haired man at the conference, it would be a waste of the Merchant Guild's reputation, while the academy itself would lose a talented individual. On the first day of summer vacation, Seika called over his harem to discuss the matter, deciding that maid Aoife would go with him. Mabel and Amyu were both assigned tasks by the protagonist, either studying or going home to be with their families. The two could only look on with envy at the maid Aoife choice. After deciding who would go, they wanted to discuss the departure time, but unexpectedly, a magnanimous prince walked in, accompanied by an elf girl of exceptional beauty and figure. Upon entering the hall, the prince first looked around, then began his boastful performance. This prince was from the neighboring country, and his purpose was to assist the protagonist in completing his dragon investigation. However, before the prince could even get to the point after greeting the protagonist, his attention shifted to Aoife. "What's your name?" "My name is Aoife. Please join our country's harem and become my wife." The prince stunned everyone present. How could someone dare to steal a wife in front of others? After recovering from the shock, Aoife quickly and shyly explained that she was actually the male protagonist's slave and maid, and had no right to accept anyone's advances. The prince thought, "Isn't that simple? So, to be precise, please take her away." Seika was bewildered by the prince's 2 consecutive actions and was momentarily speechless. Fortunately, the elf girl the prince brought was experienced and quickly reminded the prince that there were too many people here, and that it would be better to discuss buying after arriving at the private room. Seika dared not mention the maid Aoife again and directly discussed the content of his commission with the prince. It turned out that in the prince's country, there was a giant dragon that had lived with the people in a small town for hundreds of years. But for some reason, its temperament suddenly changed this year appear, and it began to attack the fields and livestock. Therefore, the prince formed an investigation team and invited the male protagonist to go and investigate. The next day, Seika, along with Aoife, boarded a carriage with the prince and embarked on a cross-border journey. After a short 9-day journey, Seika and the others finally arrived at their destination. As soon as they got off the carriage, Seika saw the giant dragon they were to investigate. Although its size looked huge, it was still a small fry compared to the male protagonist's mount. Just as the prince was introducing the giant dragon to the male protagonist, when the dragon was displaying its basic information, it suddenly charged at them. Just as Aoife was about to be attacked, a mysterious figure nearby summoned a lava tiger, driving the dragon away. After saving Aoife, the lava tiger suddenly became powerful again and charged straight at her. Seeing the situation was dire, Seika quickly used a breath-based yin-yang technique to suppress it, but the lava tiger's body temperature was much higher than he had imagined, and the released pillars couldn't stand it. His paper whisked and rushed over to distract the lava tiger from attacking Aoife again. Just as the protagonist was about to unleash his ultimate move to block the lava tiger's attack, a dark purple chain suddenly appeared around his neck. It turned out that the mysterious figure who had summoned the lava tiger had intervened. He slowly walked up to the protagonist, took off his hat, and then put the lava tiger inside. Seika quickly stepped forward and asked the prince who this person was. It turned out the mysterious man was the leader of a mercenary group the prince had hired. During their conversation, the male protagonist could sense the leader's arrogance and disdain for a nobleman like himself. Upon learning the man's identity, Seika was stunned. Why would the prince need a mercenary group in his own country? Were his own men incompetent? Hearing this, the prince lowered his head sheepishly and replied that he actually wanted to defeat the dragon himself, and only the lava tiger summoned by the leader had a chance of success. Seika retorted that his tiny lava tiger couldn't even reach the dragon's tail, let alone succeed. And even if he did succeed, would the king and people agree? After all, the dragon was a symbol of the nation. Although the male protagonist's words made sense, the prince remained obstinate because he had been brainwashed by the leader, believing the dragon would attack humans sooner or later, so it was better to defeat it sooner rather than later. Seeing the prince's insistence, Seika couldn't persuade him further and could only take Aoife to the library to find information about the dragon. From the ancient books, the male protagonist learned the dragon was hatched from an egg by the queen hundreds of years ago. Although this account may not be entirely accurate, the dragon did indeed live with the town's residents. Later, a female dragon arrived, and the two dragons built a nest on the mountain. 50 years later, the two dragons began to act strangely, exhibiting similar symptoms to the dragon in the story. An investigation revealed that they had given birth, which caused them to become wary of their surroundings. After their offspring grew up and flew away, the two dragons returned to normal. 50 years later, the foreign female dragon also passed away, and only the original male dragon remained, living there until now. After reading this, Seika decided to investigate the dragon's nest the next day. After all, he couldn't bring himself to attack without knowing the truth. However, due to the danger, he didn't plan to bring Aoife along. That night, Aoife found Seika and said the prince had been calling for his maid, so he was scared and wanted to sleep with him. Seeing Aoife's pitiful eyes, Seika softened and agreed. In the middle of the night, the two lay in bed. The straight man protagonist then began his perplexing behavior. He actually asked Aoife if she wanted to be part of the prince's harem. If she did, he wouldn't object. After all, becoming a member of the royal harem was an honorable marriage. Although Seika meant to respect Aoife's choice, Aoife interpreted it as Seika disliking her and wanting her to become a prince's concubine. In the end, Aoife spent what should have been a happy night sadly. The next morning, Seika found the prince and told him he wanted to go up the mountain to find the dragon's lair. Planned to go up the mountain. It would take at least 5 or 6 days. If he played his part well in those days, he might be able to win over Aoife. After Seika left, the elf found Aoife and said she wanted to talk to her alone. It turned out that she had already seen through Aoife's ability to control spirits, because Yeda and she were probably of the same race. That kid was a monster. For the sake of the prince's harem dream, the elf spoke ill of the male lead in front of Aoife. She thought the male lead was a bad thing, and the Aoife probably couldn't notice that all the elves were avoiding him. Although Aoife admitted that Seika was somewhat strange, she always insisted that Seika was human, simply because she had grown up with him since childhood. But even so, the elf was unwilling to let go of this opportunity. Could it be that the male lead was is she her parents' biological daughter? Upon hearing this, Aoife instantly lost her confidence. She was certain of the male protagonist's father, but not his mother. Therefore, the elf believed that the male protagonist's mother was likely a demon, which was why he possessed such great power. She felt that Aoife should leave the male protagonist and become one of the prince's concubines. Meanwhile, to fulfill the prince's request, Seika went alone to the dragon's lair. But how could the dragon be a match for the male protagonist? It was easily defeated and pinned to the ground, and the male protagonist used magic to firmly restrain it. Later, Seika also noticed the dragon's projectiles. It turned out that the dragon's personality had changed drastically because it had become a mother. On the other hand, after showing Aoife around the harem, the elf brought her to the prince's side. The prince, seeing Aoife's arrival, seemed to have been prepared and asked the merchant beside him to appraise her. She seems to be a good catch. This made Aoife a little scared. So, after obtaining the merchant's contract, the prince decided to redeem Aoife from the male protagonist. At first, Aoife did not agree, because this matter required the male protagonist's consent. The prince didn't care at all. He believed that as long as the ransom was paid enough, Seika wouldn't refuse. Even if Seika disagreed, he would issue the kingdom's slave conscription decree to forcibly buy her. He had also heard from the elves that he didn't understand how dangerous the male protagonist was, but for the sake of Aoife's safety, he had to do it. The male protagonist also said that he had no objections if Aoife was willing. However, despite this, Aoife's heart remained with the male protagonist. He refused to let the prince pay the ransom. The prince was also stunned. As the male protagonist's slave, her freedom was restricted in everything. Even her life and death were in the hands of others. He didn't understand why why Aoife disagreed. The elves told Aoife not to act rashly, and that her strength wouldn't be of much use. So, under the elves' attack, Aoife's finger was cut. If Aoife's bloodstain was on this piece of paper, Aoife would be free from the male protagonist and became part of the prince's harem. Naturally, Aoife was unwilling. Just at this critical moment, Seika finally arrived. Simply put, Seika had become friends with the dragon because he helped it hatch an empty egg, which was why he agreed to ride on its back. And now, the important thing was that the male protagonist needed those skilled in fire magic helped the dragon hatch its eggs. Like Aoife, Aoife successfully escaped the crisis and thanked the male protagonist for his actions. However, Shrika, a complete idiot, didn't understand. Upon arriving at the empty egg site, he was attacked by a crimson tiger. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and subdued the attacker. Their initial purpose in accepting the prince's commission was to get close to the dragon's egg, but Seika had forced them to do so. Therefore, Seika had to die today. After the crimson tiger broke the male protagonist's yin-yang magic, Curly launched another attack. However, before the male protagonist could react, the crimson tiger was blasted away by a force. Just as the male protagonist was stunned, he looked at Aoife. This was Aoife's power. Aoife felt that this time she would definitely not hold Seika. Since the summoned beast couldn't defeat Curly, she ordered the entire army to attack. But before they could even get close to Seika, he used yin-yang magic to overwhelm the crimson tiger. Seeing the male protagonist's overwhelming strength, Curly couldn't help but suspect his background, wouldn't let them go easily, so he immediately became their companion and captured them. Since he couldn't get Curly to fight back, he decided to fight with all his might. But before he could even exert his strength, his spellbook was burned by Aoife. Seeing Aoife's change made the protagonist feel gratified, and her magic also improved. So the protagonist brought the mercenaries to the prince. After learning the whole story, the prince also felt disappointed. The protagonist, to explain the reason for the dragon's drastic change in temperament, naturally told him that the dragon had become his mother. The reason he was ridden by the dragon was because he helped it hatch eggs. To the dragon, it had protected the country for hundreds of years, and they were like its family. So the protagonist suggested that the prince repay the dragon's kindness. As long as they helped it hatch eggs, it would naturally continue to protect them. It just poisoned it after entering its lair. This made the protagonist's expression instantly calm down. He didn't understand the prince's meaning. Seeing the protagonist offering a toast, the prince, determined to punish the protagonist, decided to use magic. He believed the protagonist's magic caused the dragon's abnormality. Now, the protagonist decided to submit and not resist. However, the prince then approached to Aoife, believing Aoife was now free, and it was time for her to leave. Seika felt the prince should fulfill his responsibilities more than women. Hearing this, the silent elf finally laughed, seemingly understanding the protagonist's origins. He ordered the soldiers to put away their weapons and apologize to the protagonist, saying he should ask the Aoife's opinion. Aoife then approached the prince. Although she was honored by the prince's favor, she wanted to remain by the protagonist's side. The elf apologized again and requested a private conversation with Aoife. It turned out Aoife was a descendant of the elves. After learning that Aoife liked the male protagonist, the elf bestowed upon Aoife some of its own light spirits. These were extremely rare spirits with healing magic. The elf always believed that Aoife could win over the male protagonist. In another year, something significant seemed to happen. Would suddenly appear and challenge him to a duel. After 2.5 years of being tortured by Kunkun, the second brother didn't expect that he was so suited to military life, so he was very grateful to Seika for sending him to the army. Amyu also learned from Aoife that the second brother often bullied Seika when they were young, so she offered to fight in the male protagonist's place. Seeing someone helping him out, the male protagonist naturally didn't refuse and encouraged the two to duel. But the second brother, being a soldier, said that Amiyu could use a real sword, while he would use a wooden sword, but the rule was that magic could not be used. As the sparring began, it seemed that the second brother was not Amyu's match. Under relentless pressure from his opponent, the second brother was soon tripped up, and Amyu seized the opportunity. Just when the protagonist thought the battle was over, the second brother suddenly unleashed a powerful attack. In that split second of Amyu's stunned silence, the second brother had already knocked the sword out of his hand and defeated her. The second brother's next target was the protagonist, but just as the protagonist was about to give in, the appearance of the blue-haired girl Fiona attracted its attention. She felt that the second brother had no chance of winning the duel. Although she thought it was a bit cruel to say this, she initially thought the second brother would be angry, but he seemed to have no doubt about Fiona, blood of a priestess and a royal family, and she herself was her holy knight. Upon hearing her identity, Aoife and the others were surprised. Why would a princess like her grace the protagonist's pigsty? Red hair and green eyes were indeed very much in line with the hero. Just as she had seen, it seemed her mother had made the same request before her death. The princess then made a request to the male protagonist. Before she left, she hoped to go shopping with him. Seeing that he had offered himself up, Seika naturally wouldn't let this opportunity pass. So, while shopping, to prevent them from getting separated, the princess took Seika's small cane by the hand. This left the two behind them speechless. After all, the princess was a princess, and walking on the street, she was naturally a princess. This troubled Blue Cat greatly. If she dressed more plainly, would she be like an ordinary person? They're spell casting. However, at this moment, the princess seemed to foresee something. She told the male protagonist to follow her. Seeing a construction site ahead, the second brother suggested they be careful, and just as an accident was about to happen, the wooden rope above their heads suddenly snapped, about to hit them. The second brother and Amyu instantly, using magic magic to protect the two. The male protagonist thanked them after being rescued from the roadside and gave it to the princess, then personally put it on her. Since this was the princess's first gift, she said she would cherish it. The group was on their way to the capital when they were attacked by bandits. However, the princess remained calm in the face of this sudden situation because her ability to foresee the future had already anticipated this. So, to protect everyone, Seika decided to take the initiative to fight back. Princess ordered the male protagonist to capture the bandit alive. This was, of course, a piece of cake for the male protagonist, and he captured all the enemies in no time. At the same time, on the other side, another group of bandits was also wiped out. Their enemies were the demons. Although Seika and his group had captured the bandits, the woman said the bandits would attack again. Back in the capital, Seika and the princess parted ways. Before parting, the princess reminded the male protagonist not to forget that she would always be his companion. Seika pondered this. In his previous life, he was an onmyoji, but after being transported to another world, he had another identity. Just now, the demons, in order to kill the hero Amyu, used teleportation magic to enter the academy. Initially, the demons thought things would go smoothly, but unexpectedly, as soon as they entered, they were surrounded by red blood. Although they sometimes saw students walking on the path, when they attacked, the students were all teleported away by a mysterious force, leaving a strange talisman on the ground. This stunned the demons. As they had all encountered this, the general realized something was wrong. For the safety of his team, he was about to retreat, but how could the male protagonist let them leave so easily? Faced with the male protagonist's sudden appearance, the general, while cautious. Also, he checked the other party's identity, but the red poop beside him didn't seem to realize the seriousness of the situation, still thinking the male protagonist was an opponent of equal strength. However, before he could finish speaking, he was instantly defeated by the male protagonist. To avenge her companion, Lilia planned to lift the seal on her body. Suddenly, a third eye opened on the girl's forehead. Faced with this terrifying power, Seika immediately recognized her as a three-eyed person, and one whose power was far greater than the human's evil eye. However, Seika felt it was a pity, as the other party couldn't petrify her. He then summoned the White Spirit Serpent. Seeing that he couldn't harm the White Serpent, the Rabbit Brother planned to use his taming abilities to try and turn the White Serpent into his own monster. The White Serpent seemed to understand half of what he was saying. Seeing the Rabbit Brother's confused behavior, Seika found it laughable that he wanted to subdue a monster born from human resentment. Looking at the terrifying aura emanating from the male protagonist, the general knew from the beginning that he was no match for him. But still, a lucky Minotaur suddenly suggested that while attacking the protagonist, he should let the general escape. However, the general naturally disagreed, believing that the Minotaur must survive and deliver the information to his people, while he would stay behind to fight the Seika. Seeing the general's panic, the Minotaur was also confused. He was curious about who the protagonist really was. The protagonist, having overheard their conversation, naturally wouldn't give them a chance. Although the Minotaur escaped successfully, he remained stubborn and refused to believe that the protagonist was the Demon King. Just then, a rabbit suddenly appeared, startling him and causing him to vomit blood. Looking down, he finally discovered his wounds. Was this the protagonist's doing? Before dying, he finally realized that the protagonist was the Demon King. Meanwhile, the opening ceremony arrived as scheduled, but just as the protagonist was about to give his speech, a group of armored figures suddenly appeared. However, the real storm arrives after school starts. To protect the hero Amyu, who has been framed by the country's higher-ups, the protagonist completely tears off his disguise, transforming into a demon to massacre the palace assassins. Ultimately, with the princess's intervention, he uses his godlike ability to resurrect all soldiers to quell the storm and continues to willingly remain Amyu's shadow. In my opinion, the most brilliant aspect of this work is the protagonist's clear-headedness. He knows that in his past life, his sharp edge on the continent led to his death. In this life, he uses Eastern yin-yang techniques to crush the Western magic system. And that brings Season 1 to an end. Stick around for Season 2.